Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the retention of Pakistan on the grey list as far as the FATF is concerned. Of course, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about Pakistan's retention on the grey list as far as the FATF is concerned. While acknowledging that Pakistan has made significant progress on certain key points, they've chosen to retain us on the grey list nevertheless. Recently, we've also seen statements coming out as far as the politicization of the process of assessment as far as retention on the grey list of FATF is concerned. We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about the ramifications of this decision vis-a-vis the efforts Pakistan has made in trying to clamp down on the issues that were raised last time as far as the FATF is concerned, issues pertaining to money laundering, issues pertaining to terror financing, all of those things today. We'll also be talking about the Peshawar blast and the terrorism, spate of terrorism recently that we've seen. But in the later part of the program. Let's start off with Salman Shah, who's an advisor with Punjab government. Thank you for joining us. We also have with us Dr. Manzoor Ahmed, who's a former advisor with World Bank. Salman Saab, I think we've also spoken before about what were the speculations regarding Pakistan's retention on the grey list as far as the FATF is concerned. And I think that we were all expecting this to happen. Isn't that true?
I think the movement is in the right direction, and the FATF has observed that Pakistan has been able to do most of the things which were required of Pakistan. And it was not that as if Pakistan didn't want to do these things. It's in the interest of Pakistan to ensure that our banking system is clean, and we know that it cannot be used for terror financing or money laundering. And now the systems are in place, and so if it is misused, it can be detected very quickly. Of course, very few people have actually been prosecuted, and what few are being prosecuted, I think very few have been convicted. So that is something which the international community is questioning. And we do have a legal system in which the burden of proof is really on the state to bring all the proof and to be able to come to a conclusion whether somebody has actually done this kind of activity or not. But the system itself has been cleansed of the issues. Currently, you know that
Salman Sahab, overall, when we talk about politicization as far as this assessment process is concerned, you agree with that, right?
Well, to a certain extent, everything is politics. But on the other side, when you're talking about a system of international financial system has to have credibility also. So if Pakistan actually does everything which is needed, and the Pakistani financial system is better than the financial system of, let's say, India or lots of other countries who are not in the grey list, then the questions are definitely raised about the credibility of the entire system. Now, I think Pakistan has been under the microscope for quite some time, and we have made good progress, particularly in the last year or two. We have moved forward, and I expect that by June, if this is not very political, then by June we should be out of the grey list.
Right. Let me come back to you. Let's hope that happens. I'm going to go to Dr. Manzoor. Dr. Manzoor, I hope you've been following what Dr. Salman Shah is saying. He's saying that it has to, of course, when we talk about politicization, yes, but I think he's very pertinently said that there has to be some credibility to the whole process. Would you agree that, barring there being the kind of politicization that we've recently even talked about, we've seen, perhaps this decision should probably have been to the contrary at this time even?
Well, I can agree, with most of what the previous speaker was saying. Yes, and I also agree that there is politics. When you look at, for example, when Iran last time, when they had agreed on this nuclear deal, and they were removed from the blacklist, and immediately Trump canceled that deal, and then they were put back. So there is I think, a bit of that. But the problem is that there's no way out for us except to complete the compliance as early as possible, because it's hurting our economy. Now, of all the points, you see, we were given two concurrent lists. One was by the Paris plenary, and the other is our Asian Pacific group. And both, it's just 1 point from each that is pending. And unless I think we satisfactorily address that, I think they might, put it another 6 months. So we have to move there. One is about, they say that your conviction and prosecution, you're not really, your heart is not into it, and you're not doing it forcefully. And the other is that there are some money laundering. They say there's some deficiency there. And that deficiency in money laundering, I think they can, they can be more effective. They can convince them. They can exactly be more focused. What exactly do they want? Because in other, for example, when we were originally 34 points, and most of them, we gave them a very focused, this is what we have done, this is what we have done, and finally we were able to get out of all those points, and they accepted our progress. Now here are these 2 points. So it's very difficult to get out of it, because in this Paris, there are 39 countries. And
do you think Salman Saab, when he says that perhaps in June we will have a different decision, do you agree with that?
Yes, but every time it's been happening for the last 2-3 years that every time we say that now we do this and maybe we'll be out. Now we do this, then we'll be out. So just hoping will not work. We'll have to be a little more focused. First, is this our own Asian Pacific group here, and still they are not satisfied. They're still asking. They had given a separate list, and the FATF and that had been there were commonalities, but there it is. So not hope, but actually be more practical.
You're saying that we need to deliver on those 2 points. Let me come back to you.
Yes.
Salman Saab, I do agree. You think that it's really just about those 2 points as far as our progress on them or lack thereof, and that unless that happens, it's likely that will probably be continued, according to Manzoor Saab, saying that maybe another 6 months, unless we make considerable progress as far as money laundering is concerned, as far as prosecution, which is what Manzoor Saab is saying. We're saying that our heart's not in the right place, or whether we're not clamping down on it enough. Is perhaps, then this is a very, for us, isn't it a long-term goal? Because when we talk about, there's also other kinds of reform needed for that kind of strict clamping down, right?
Yes, I think, MARUKH, if they were not satisfied with our efforts, we would have been in the blacklist by now. Or if our heart, it's very difficult to assess whether our heart is in it or not. But yes, prosecution has to be effective.
Right.
Now, in our particular case, there is a lot of criminal activity, and then there is a lot of tax evasion which goes through the banking system, and lots of properties are purchased right at the highest level up. Our politics is also revolving along those issues. So I think that some of the prosecution may bear some fruit. Whether it will be sufficient to show that our heart is in it, I don't know, but my feeling is that we are on the way out of the grey list, and inshallah by June we should come out because we have made
So
sincere
Nazar,
efforts.
let me
The
interject for a
central
second.
bank has
When we talk about clamping down on issues like you are saying, when we talk ask sincerity or whether how sincere we are in our efforts, the point is when we talk about this kind of action, regardless of which government there is at this time, the way things are, the way numbers are, however sincere the government may be in trying to get to that kind of reform, because we saw, we have recently seen a move towards criminal as far as our criminal justice system is concerned, reforming that is concerned. When we talk about this kind of action, it will mean a whole other kind of reform. With regard to the efforts by the government towards that, the kind of position the government, the kind of numbers there are at this time, and overall, it becomes kind of difficult. Wouldn't you agree?
yes, but I think it is also a fairly complicated process. Now, if you look at it, that the National Bank has just recently been fined in New York, particularly for these reasons. And National Bank of Pakistan is a state-owned bank. So it means that there is some deficiency in our systems. But it is something that we have to correct. On the other hand, our people and our business systems and our political systems have accepted money laundering for quite some time. So, as you know, that there are lots of cases on political leaders for having used the banking system for money laundering, but under our laws, maybe it was permissible to do it. So those things have changed now. So even the National Bank problems may have been not very recent, but maybe 6 months or more ago. So I think it's a fast-moving thing. We are moving on it. We are doing it. We are not evading the issue. And if by June we are not out of this thing, then one would start to wonder what is the real objective of all of this.
Right.
So,
Let me come back to you. Dr. Manzoor, what about the recent? We've seen, the finance bill also. We've seen overall a move by the government to make things more transparent. And one of the things that was talked about, even amidst all this criticism by the opposition, was the government said that they want to make things more transparent. They want to make sure that there is a board of governors and that is independent. All of those things also will have a contributory effect on this kind of strict action on issues like this, no?
Well, let's not mix things. Finance bill was mostly, they wanted to raise some taxes and some exemptions, etc. And it had much less, the recent mini budget bill, this had much less to do with FATF. What the problem with the money laundering, the two main points. With the money laundering, they say that every now and then you come up with this amnesty scheme, and everything is forgiven. And they said there's no transparency there. And we just announced another one. So that money laundering, they think that this is a big conduit for money laundering, these amnesty schemes. And the other thing is, they say that there are these people who are named in the UN that sanction list, and they have not been there. They're free, and there's not been prosecution, has not been. So these are two very clear points. And the other thing, Saman Shah was saying about that this is a complicated process, but if we look at it, in 2016, we were taken off the grey list. We were previously put on the grey list, and in 2016, the government indicated that they'd be serious, they would do all that, and they took us off. And they put us, when by 2018, they realized that actually whatever the government committed didn't do anything, so they put us back on this list. And going on the blacklist really is the ultimate. It's only countries like North Korea who don't care, or maybe it was Iran. Just two countries on the blacklist, and going on the blacklist will be a big disaster, and that
Right, of course.
mostly has been thanks to China, Turkey, and Malaysia. Two or three countries. We need 2-3 votes. And otherwise, most other countries are not convinced of our series. Now, I must say that even this last report, they say that Pakistan has made a lot of progress, and it's not only here that they accept. It's also this year the U.S. This terrorism report came out, and they also accepted that Pakistan has done a lot of effort. They're just saying that now you have these 2 points, you have to move on. And then even IMF in its last report, they said, you have to address these points, because IMF is also linking its program with
Right.
this.
Let me come back to you. So, Mansab, overall, as far as the international climate is concerned, with regard to what's happening, I just want to know how relevant you think it is with regard to the politicization factor that we talk about. Overall, the political scenario in terms of Ukraine and Russia and India now, with regard to US and India, not that they have been sanctioned at this time, but the possibility of it perhaps, the relationship between USA and India, and the fact that it is getting tricky for India now not to take a stand on the war. Do you think that itself and the clout factor will have anything to do with this kind of decision in the future also, or can have any ramifications for us?
Yes, I think the entire global financial system would be under scrutiny, and already there are voices where they are questioning how Russian oligarchs are able to invest in London and properties all over Europe and do business, and nobody knows the source of income of these oligarchs. So the Western financial system, which has shut its eyes on this whole infrastructure for money laundering, is waking up. So now it's going to become increasingly difficult to hide your wealth, and the curtains which you were able to put on this are being removed. And so I think there will be this recognition that it's not only countries who are in the grey list who need to come out of the grey list, but there are lots of countries who are in no list are actually the foundation of all of these things. And particularly the Western banking system or the financial system has allowed this whole thing to flourish. So I think this period is going to come to an end. A lot more transparency would be needed. And we may be very cynical and say this is all politics, but at the end of the day, it has a lot to do with credibility and economics and trust. So if the Western financial system loses trust, then it will be very damaging for the West. Similarly, if you look at China, which is coming up with its own system, it can only become a global system if it really gains the trust of the entire world. So I think these issues.
What about India losing its credibility? Let me come back to you, Dr. Manzoor. What about India losing its credibility as far as a market, financial market for the West? Dr. Manzoor, can you hear me?
Sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Now I can. Now I can.
Okay. All this happens. There's a system of peer review. When the countries, for example, in the Asian Pacific group, they peer review all the countries. But if there is no other country saying that India is met or whatever, they point out something, maybe 5 points, 7 points, and if India clears up, it says okay, all right, you're clear. But in case of Pakistan, the problem is that in our peer review we fail. So it's not just Pakistan saying this. And there are, for example, in this FATF Paris, there are 39 countries. and we don't get any support. They don't trust us. So we have to make now we have taken some serious steps, and they just are saying that, okay, you've done well, but these are two things that you have to address. You have addressed, you were given 34 points in the two lists, and you have cleared 32 points. So just these 2 points show us some progress so that you can be out of it. And the one other thing we have to realize is it's not other countries, it's our own problem as well. Because I read in the newspaper our foreign minister saying that a yearly loss of $10 billion in Pakistan's economy by just being on this grey list. So we have to do it for our own sake, even if others don't ask us.
Right, of course. Salman Sahab, regardless of overall the international scenario, overall the international situation, what are some of the measures you anticipate the government will now take to ensure that these 2 points are addressed adequately, so that we don't face another delay of another 6 months?
Well, I think because some of the things are sub judice and they are part of our judicial system, and whenever we get the results over there, one can't predict when we'll get something done over there. So that is difficult to assess. But I think gradually, if the conclusion is that Pakistan has now done all the things which are needed to ensure that nothing like this can happen in the future, then if we can convince the world that what happened in the past is now corrected, and the system is now foolproof, it cannot happen again, then we'll come out of it. But as I said, that very recently we have seen that one of our major banks has been fined pretty heavily. And we have not really been able to say that this was not done on merit, this whole prosecution. So I think in that sense, whether we'll come out in 6 months or not, I'm not too sure, but I think we will come out of it. Secondly, the politics is always there, and you will have to build up a coalition. And as Dr. Manzoor was saying, when 39 countries become unanimous in your favor, then there is no way you cannot be bought out of the grey list. So there needs to be a diplomatic effort. There needs to be
even at home, Salman Sahab, I'm unfortunately running out of time, but a quick question as far as at home, on the home ground is concerned. Do you think that, whatever the current scenario may be, a political scenario at this time, do you think perhaps over time there will be consensus, of perhaps there being a unity on issues like, for example, economy? A charter of economy, which was talked about again, now and again, but it never really happened. Because things like this and the overall impact of it, and then now we've seen this fine perhaps now being levied as a result of what happened a long time ago, is suitable and perhaps to the interest of each and every political party.
Well, I think there is a bit of a consensus on the economy, because the divide, which was a historic divide, was between a state-driven economy versus a private-driven economy. And now it is, I think, the private sector and the market economy is the way forward. And all political parties, to a great extent, think that the market economy is the way forward. That means that the country has to be deregulated, and we have to privatize things, we have to liberalize things, we have to extend our trade relationships across the board. Because remember, if you have a good solid economic base and good solid economic relationships, then these kinds of issues are manageable, and you don't really get into trouble with the international organizations. So
right, thank you so much for being with us. Salman Saab, thank you for joining us. Dr. Manzoor Ahmed, thank you for being with us. Thank you for your very valuable input on such an important topic. We will take a short break and then come back and talk about the Peshawar blast and the ramification of this spate of terrorism we've seen recently. Welcome back. We will be talking about, of course, the recent Peshawar attack and the fact that ISK has claimed responsibility, the rise in terrorism, and of course the timing of it, the way that Pakistan has again been targeted, the way that we bleed again, and the fact that Pakistan continues to make efforts to address this kind of terrorism, the kind of tragic incident in Peshawar, so many loss of lives. I have with me Yasir Janjua, who's a security analyst. Thank you for being with us. Also Sangeem Khan, who is a senior analyst. Thank you for joining us. Ji, Yasir, like you were just talking about the timing of the attack itself. And the fact that, of course, it seems to be, you know, an effort at a sabotage, right?
See, as I was saying a few minutes ago, the timing is very significant.
Right.
They target Shias on a Friday prayer. They target on a day when the first test match between Australia and Pakistan has just started.
Right.
So the last time Australians were scared away. So they thought this is the good time to scare away the Westerners or the outsiders, the foreigners from Pakistan. However, there is a greater degree of evidence that this has been launched from Afghan soil, or connections go back to the Afghan soil, and Pakistan government has taken up the matter with the Afghan government, the Taliban government. We know for a fact that Taliban and ISKP do not look each other in the eye.
Right.
They have differing views on how Sharia law has to be implemented. Primarily, the Taliban consider that their land within Afghanistan is what they are concerned about. ISKP otherwise thinks, well, the Islamic Caliphate has to be across the world, Sharia law has to be applied uniformly, and there has to be one caliphate. So that's the diverging point between them. And it is because of this that they have been up against each other in the past years as well. However, as much as the ISKP has claimed responsibility for this attack, I am not under any illusion that there is other agencies and other hostile forces also involved in this. Now, targeting Shias, obviously we have Iran as next door neighbors, and at a time when you see the Saudis and Iranis are trying to come very close to each other. The recent interview by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman talking about ongoing talks and likely positive outcome between Iran and Saudi Arabia, because he says we are coexistent and we have to live. That's very strong message to the US and Western world. And at that time, targeting Shias inside Pakistan. So there were multiple objectives they have achieved. This is probably the biggest attack after the Mastoong attack a few years ago. 63 people killed or shaheed. So it's very significant. And ISKP is trying to regain ground in a void created or in a vacuum created by the departure of Americans. The Taliban government per se do not have the intelligence capability to track the terrorists and to track groups like ISKP. And that is why Pakistan government has offered its support and help in intelligence capability. Dr. Mueed Yusuf also visited Afghanistan a few weeks ago, and then a couple of other exchanges are taking place between Pakistan and Afghanistan at level, because Pakistan is concerned about the regional peace. Prime Minister Imran Khan has been saying categorically that peace in Pakistan is directly proportional to peace in Afghanistan.
Right, let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Sangeem Khan. Ji, Sagin Sahab, overall, I hope you've been listening to what Yasir Sahab is saying. I think he raises very pertinent issues when he talks about, of course, the timing of it, one. And also the fact that, you know, the way the intelligence capability of the Afghan government itself to be able to deal with this kind of terrorism coming from the IS groups like this, you know.
First of all, thank you very much for having me. Yes, absolutely. I agree with the other worthy speaker that the timing is very significant. In a way, when the the foreign cricketing team is on tour to Pakistan and the ongoing dynamics of the region, it really speaks volume. There's this very coordinated attack which happened, and this very important point what we need to keep in mind that especially Pakistan and other regional countries have been predicting that U.S. irresponsible withdrawal is going to have a cataclysmic impact in the region. Particularly, Pakistan would be affected. And we see the recent, blast, in Peshawar that really speaks volume. The capabilities of the ISK, the way it carried out such kind of attack. And importantly, we need to keep in mind, ever since when the Afghan Taliban took over, the status of their non-state to state actor. So that really, created a major, space for the ISK to become a major violent in the region. Secondly, what is really needed, we see that many experts have been projecting that increased violence as one of the most, probable scenarios after post-US withdrawal is going to impact Pakistan.
And that is what. Let me come back to you, Yasab. Of course, it's true when we say that there have been projections of this kind of terrorism that may happen. The timing may, of course, be crucial. But of course, like you also mentioned, Moeed Yusuf's visit to Afghanistan just recently, before this kind of attack happened, to coordinate and of course, to help offer our help in any efforts against this kind of terrorism. But how effective do you think we are going to be? Of course, we will extend our help. We will try to do our best. But when the Prime Minister talks to the world about the humanitarian crisis, and he also talks about the fact that, of course, the regional security is extremely important, not just for Pakistan, but for all this region. And of course, with two states being nuclear, all of that, the background of all of that, how effective do you think it's going to be?
See, there is a need for a regional cooperation at the larger canvas.
Okay.
And Pakistan alone, despite the fact that Pakistan intelligence capability is quite effective, however, there is need for collaboration, cooperation from other countries in the region as well. Countries neighboring Afghanistan and countries in the region. Because the Taliban government does not have the capacity or the capability. So in presence of these limitations,
how do you think they take to our offer of this kind? How do they take to our offer of help?
Well, they do. Pakistan and the Taliban government have a, if I can't say extremely good, but it's a very good working relationship.
Okay.
And they do take our advice and they do take assistance from us. The problem right now is this is emanating from Afghanistan. So we have to rely on the Afghans. No matter what amount of intelligence available to us, we can pass back to them. The actionable intelligence or the action has to be taken by the Afghans. They are doing in a way, obviously there are some things which are covertly done, so they are not publicly, but they are doing. But however, there is a limitation, and that's why you see this happening. And this is not the first time the ISKP has done this. They did it on the 27th of August in Kabul, at the Kabul airport. So they've been demonstrating that they are not satisfied after the exit of the Americans. They are not satisfied with the Taliban there. So it's now, unfortunately, Taliban do not have that. So we, not only us, like Iran,
do you
China,
think it also
Russia,
has to do with the fact that there is within the ranks of the Afghan government, disagreement on how forceful they're going to be against groups like this, or no?
Well, Haqqani network has sort of joined the Talibans, but there are factions within the Taliban as well who do not, who are not on the same page. So that is primarily the reason you saw that incident of the border fencing on Pakistan being disrupted by some elements. They were Taliban or the Taliban sympathizers, but they were operating in the pockets, not taking direct orders from the Kabul government. That's why such an action against Pakistan, which was not expected, did happen. So these are the reasons you see those are pockets of independent warlords who are operating, who claim to be Taliban, who are under the general umbrella of Taliban, but they have within their own pockets their own ideology. And there is a great possibility some of them are cooperating with the ISKP as well. Because ISKP, if they have a sanctuary in Afghanistan, somebody's providing them the shelter. They are operating from Afghanistan.
So within the government, you think, let me come back to you. Ji, Sangeet Sahab, do you agree? I mean, we're talking about the fact that there are disagreements within the Afghan government as far as groups like this is concerned, whether we can call them sympathizers or, you know, elements within the government, and that kind of disunity also is perhaps, you know, giving them some meat as far as these kind of attacks are concerned.
Yes, absolutely. I do agree with the point here that there exists some sort of disagreement between the Afghan top leadership and the leadership on the ground, because on the ground they do not agree in a way that we have been sacrificing for over 2 decades. They are then why, you know, you are going to talk with the Western world when it comes to an economic front or the diplomatic front, for that reason when it comes to education. So within the ranks of Taliban there is disagreement. Also there were some media reports that between the Afghanis and the Afghan Taliban over these some, you know, top military portfolios related to defense related, because there were some media reports that there were some disagreements as well as between the Afghanis, but as well as those on the foot as well as on the top leadership. Other than that, very importantly, that I missed last time, and that is the recent upstick of terrorism, especially we see the TTP or ISK. We must keep in mind when the US was present in Afghanistan, so, you know, it was not that much, you know, coordinated in a way, because it was, defeated by the US airstrikes. There was this Afghan army, and we must keep in mind TTP as well as this thing, we Afghan Taliban, they have this agreement with the ISK. So I think this is very much important, as well as the Pakistani civil and political military leadership, you know, have been well aware that instability in Afghanistan is going to cause instability in Pakistan. But unfortunately, there are some, you know, lacunas that we missed, I guess, in a way, especially when it comes to national action plan, because it clearly stated that irrespective of any group, action would be taken, you know, decisively. So there are some lacunas that we missed. So that's why we see the recent upsticks. But anyhow, it's never too late. I think there's it is, you know, high time to have some consolidated and coordinated efforts to completely annihilate them.
Right. Yasir, what about the involvement from across the border? You know, we have to acknowledge that's a very real issue.
You mean to say the eastern border?
Yes.
I said in my opening remarks, I have absolutely no doubts, because it's in the interest of our enemy to keep us engaged on the western side or the terrorism inside Pakistan. So there is a definite hidden agenda. And this ISKP, now after the collapse of talks with the TTP, the government of Pakistan talks with the TTP, I mean, I have no doubt that TTP, some of the elements of TTP have actually joined ISKP, or they are collaborating or cooperating with ISKP. So TTP, ISKP, and it's a no hidden secret that TTP is being funded or was being funded by Indians and still continues to get funding from Indians. So they have the money coming in from India, and they're operating through ISKP, because otherwise Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, has been decimated inside Pakistan. Nobody talks about it, because they've all gone to Afghanistan. And this is why Pakistan government is engaging with the Afghan government, that any such elements, although the Taliban have taken a pledge that they will not let the Afghan soil be used for any operations against Pakistan. However, having said that, it's about capacity as well.
We also
Saying
talk
is one
about
thing and the capacity is other thing.
capacity also, and you know, we talk about, before this we were talking about FATF and the fact that terror financing is a huge issue as far as Pakistan is concerned, and it's been on the agenda and we've done what we can. But when this kind of terror financing happens from across the border, you know, there are other nations that need to be held accountable, there are other countries that need to be held accountable, and you know, when this kind of terror ensues, like you are saying, there's no doubt that some support, some help is coming from there. We've even given proof, you know, what happened with Gulbhushan Yadav and you know, our dossier that was presented, all of the background that there is.
See, Indians were quite hopeful that on the 4th of March, Pakistan would go into the blacklist. And they had been using that mantra for the last a week or so on their national media and televisions, that Pakistan is going to be blacklisted. The problem is, now the head of the president of FATF, who has been nominated from Singapore, is of Indian origin.
Okay.
For the next 2 years, there's going to be a gentleman from Singapore. Problem is that the terror financing or the FATF regulations that this body or this organization is looking at the non-state actors.
Okay.
But in case where a state actor like an agency like RAW, when it is financing money, they don't look at that. And there is effectively no means for them to check that, because when an intelligence agency is operating, so it's using different means and different routes.
So it uses that's an escape factor, you're saying. That they managed to get out of it.
And also, let's be very honest and let's be very realistic. India is a huge economy, 1.4 billion people. The Westerners look at India differently than they look at us. So a lot of things, India as a matter of fact today is a very, very ripe case to go on the grey list.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
For their own actions. For their own actions. Forget about RAW. For their own actions. However, they are making a case against us. Pakistan has made such a good progress that out of 34, probably 33 action items have been completed. Yet, so these organizations like ISKP and Tehreek-e-Taliban or...
And the politicization of it, which is something that we have now taken up, we've talked about it. Now it's like it's out in the open.
Yes.
The fact that, you know, retention of Pakistan. But incidents like this also then make us more vulnerable to that, right?
Yes, they do make vulnerable, but see, we are on the receiving end. I mean, we would have been in much deeper problem if we were propagating this terrorism.
Right.
So the world should realize, the Western nations should realize we are at the receiving end. There are 63 people who were killed. So we haven't possibly done this. There's somebody else who's paying somebody who's coming in to do this. So they have to take cognizance of this.
Right, let me come back to you. Sagin sir, you know, Yastab is very right. He says that of course we are on the receiving end. Pakistan bleeds today. So many our people have lost lives in this blast. And that narrative, you know, needs to go forward. That narrative is what we need to tell the world. Of course, you know, we've been suffering from terrorism now for such a long time, and that is something where it comes from, how it comes, you know, across the border. The world may close its eyes to that, but the reality of this kind of terrorism permeating this region, you know, it will not only remain confined to Pakistan, which is what the Prime Minister says again and again.
Well, absolutely, I agree with Jajwa Sahib that Pakistan has been on the receiving end. You know, it is Pakistan, you know, that has, you know, sacrificed over 70,000 plus people. You know, Pakistan being a victim of terrorism, you know, and India being the, you know, the major spoiler of terrorism in Pakistan. But due to, unfortunately, are some low efforts, I mean, slow process at the diplomatic level, the world is, you know, blaming Pakistan. I think we need to really work on effectively on the diplomatic front, and we need to expose that India has been, you know, financing, you know, creating instability in Pakistan, specifically Balochistan. Since I'm from Balochistan, I have, you know, direct, you know, witnessing of the fact that the people, they have been, you know, openly now coming up that there has been this, you know, involvement of India after the incarceration of the Indian agent. So it really demands us that on the diplomatic front, we need to, you know, tell the world Pakistan has been the victim of terrorism. However, it is the India that has been sponsoring terrorism in Pakistan. One. Secondly, what is really needed as far as this whole scenario is concerned, I think we need to, reactivate National Action Plan. It was a very comprehensive plan in order to root out, eradicate terrorism from Pakistan. Secondly, what is really needed as far as the recent attack was concerned, that near to the adjoining area of Peshawar, where some of the collaborators and financiers of this specific terrorist group was arrested. So I think there is a need of some cleanup intelligence-based operations in order to eradicate those sleeper cells. Other than that, I think we also must understand that the Afghan Taliban, as of now, they have not, comprehensively consolidated power. It will take time. So I think the Taliban need also to show flexibility. They need to cooperate with the regional actors, Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran, so that if really Afghan Taliban seeks international recognition, they will have to cooperate, and they will have to leave no space for these other elements who are trying to create instability for Pakistan. And I also agree with you that instability in the region will have a cataclysmic impact all across the region, because it is a common denominator for Russia, for China, for Iran, and for Pakistan. So I think the ball is in the Afghan Taliban's court. They will have to cooperate, and it is a deep concern. TTP is a bigger threat for Pakistan, and Pakistan is, I guess, inshallah, it's ready to cooperate at every level, be it at the diplomatic level or the military level.
Right. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for being with us, Yasir Janjua Saab. Thank you for your time. Sangeem Khan, thank you for joining us today. As far as terrorism is concerned, this is not new for Pakistan, unfortunately. Pakistan continues to battle terrorism since more than a decade now. The way that we have shown resilience, I think the world has had to acknowledge. But the narrative that kind of terrorism, which is now flowing from across the border with aid from India, needs to go forward. And of course, we're resolved to make sure, and of course the government is resolved to make sure that the culprits are brought to justice. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.